Dr. Paul Pettit serves as Director of Career Services and Adjunct Faculty here at Dallas Seminary. I want to say a word real quickly that your schedule says Dr. Tim Robinson, who is coming to teach in the PM department here at DTS, but he's having trouble getting out of Northern Ireland. And so we juggled things a little bit, and Dr. Paul Pettit has agreed to pinch hit today and on short notice, which I understand that, and I appreciate it, Brother Paul. But again, he serves as Director of Career Services and Adjunct Faculty here at DTS. His background includes experience as a sportscaster, author, and retreat speaker. Paul holds degrees from the University of Kansas, Moody Bible Institute's Advanced Studies program, and both the Master of Theology and Doctor of Ministry from Dallas Seminary. Dr. Pettit and his wife, Pamela. Pam is here today, and so just wave and we will have a chance to welcome you. She is a neonatal nurse practitioner at Parkland Hospital. So we are glad that Pam's here, and I hope you get to know her as well. She's a lot of fun. They have 5 adult children and 2 grandchildren. Paul, amen, amen. By the way, did y'all hear about those 2 old men that bumped into each other? And one of them said to the other one, he said, hey, good to see you. And he said, yeah. He said, did I tell you about my grandkids? And the other one said, no, and I appreciate it. Paul enjoys the University of Kansas basketball team and Texas barbecue. Let me make a couple of adjustments there. Paul enjoys all barbecue, not just Texas barbecue. And as he's jumped ship with Kansas, I understand, and he wanted to become an ORU, Oral Roberts University fan. The basketball coach at ORU is a THM grad from Dallas Seminary. And isn't that unreal? And they just made it to the Sweet 16. So Paul wanted to jump ship and go with ORU. The problem is he has 3 sons that have gone to the University of Arkansas. So it's go Hogs. At any rate, Paul, I'm thankful that you're coming. Please join me in welcoming Paul Pettit to our chapel today.
Thank you. Thank you. I will now attempt to get this mask off without taking the microphone off. See if I can do both chewing gum and walking at the same time. Well, he warned me, but there we go. All right. Loose him and let him go. All right. Now, the reason he mentions the University of Arkansas and my 3 sons that graduated from the University of Arkansas is this weekend, Arkansas is playing Oral Roberts. So my son at Arkansas, Christian, he's a senior. He's been doing a lot of my social media, and he's been saying, "Well, this Oral Roberts is amazing." I said, "Yeah, that guy took my men's ministry class this summer, and they beat Ohio State." And you know Ohio State. Any Ohio State people here? I mean, these people, man, they're the Ohio State University. You know what I'm talking about? Or am I right? Yeah, the Ohio State University. And last week, Oral Roberts got t-shirts that says the Oral Roberts University. And then after that, not enough that they beat Ohio State, they beat University of Florida. And Florida is really known for really good basketball. And Christian's saying, man, this Oral Roberts is amazing. They keep winning and they keep winning. And he's posting, Oral Roberts is amazing. And my dad taught the coach and all this. And then he looks on the schedule and he sees, wait, they're playing my team now. This isn't funny anymore. Yeah, I'm done promoting Oral Roberts. So excited to have my wife Pam here. She is a neonatal nurse practitioner. That is the little babies, the 1-pound baby that you can hold in your hand. And for 15 years, she ministered over here at Baylor Hospital. And lots of times there would be couples here at the seminary that were going through that. And sometimes she would say, oh, I'm Pam Pettit. And they would say, Pettit. And she'd say, yeah, my husband's Paul Pettit. He works at the seminary. And it was almost like a visceral reaction. They would like grab her arm and say, oh, someone we know here at the hospital. Because, a lot of couples come here and they don't know anybody. And we have, over the years, had a lot of couples that have premature babies. I'm talking 26 weeks. A baby's supposed to be 40 weeks. 26 weeks, sometimes 25 weeks, is that right? 25 weeks, 26 weeks. And now for the last 15 years or so, ministering at Parkland Hospital, where they have also a lot of premature babies. But what a blessing to have her here. And now my wife for 30 years. Awesome. 30 years. Yeah. I'll drink to that. 30 years. 30 years. And what would it be like, though, if you said, this Pettit guy, I kind of like this Dr. Pettit. He's kind of neat. But I don't really like his wife. What would you think if I heard you say that? I like Paul Pettit, but I could do without Pam Pettit. Well, you know, you and I, we would come to blows, as they say, right? We'd be on fighting terms. Because Pam's been there for 7 years when we dated. I was a little slow. 7 years we dated. She stuck with me. I went to the Moody Bible Institute. She stuck with me. I went and did a summer in Africa, in Kenya, showing the Jesus film. She stuck with me. We came here to Dallas Seminary. She stuck with me. Helped pay tuition. Worked sometimes the night shifts. Worked weekends. And I'm in ministry still. And partly because she's able to work at Parkland Hospital. And if you were to say to me, hey, I like you, Pettit, but I don't really like your wife, I would say, you don't know my wife. But that's a little bit like some of us who say, I like Jesus, but I don't really like his church. You know, I'm all about Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth. I like the way he teaches, and I like his ethics, but I could do without his followers. Because if you came to me and said, I like you, Paul, but I don't like your wife, I'd say, if you like me, you'll love my wife. We're not going anywhere. This is my wife. You will love her if you like me. Because she and I have become one. And that's the same with Jesus and the church. In fact, Dan Kimball wrote a book that said, I like Jesus, but I don't like the church. It was a voice of some in the younger generations, and he was doing research and doing feedback on that, finding out why it is that some young people would say that. But you and I have to face that need because you and I are going out to work mostly in the church. Some of you doing pastoral work, some of you doing counseling, some of you doing Christian education, outreach. But you'll be working with God's people. And that can be invigorating and exciting. But it can also be challenging and difficult at times because sheep smell and sheep wander and sheep sometimes bring us down a little bit. And I want to say that we're going to look at a passage here from Mark. And I'm going to ask and answer these two questions. How do you motivate yourself to do real ministry? What motive do you have to get yourself in the mood to work with God's people? What motivates you to do ministry? And second, we're going to ask, what do you want Jesus to do for you? You've come a long way. Some of you from Washington, D.C., some of you from other parts of the world. And I'm going to put this in front of you and have you ponder this just for the next few minutes. We only have a few moments for this devotional. I want to have you think about that. What is it that you want Jesus to do for you? Turn with me in your copy of the scriptures to Mark chapter 10. Mark chapter 10, scroll down to verse 46. Mark chapter 10, verse 46. And they came to Jericho. And as he was going out from Jericho with his disciples and a great multitude, a blind beggar named Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, was sitting by the road. And when he heard that it was Jesus the Nazarene, he began to cry out and say, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And many were sternly telling him to be quiet. But he kept crying out all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. And Jesus stopped and said, Call him here. And they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take courage, arise, he is calling for you." And casting aside his cloak, he jumped up and came to Jesus. And answering him, Jesus said, "What do you want me to do for you?" And the blind man said to him, "Rabboni, I want to see." And Jesus said to him, Go your way. Your faith has made you well." And immediately he regained his sight, and he began following him on the road. The word of the Lord. Look at this Timotheus. And he has a weird first name, doesn't he? Bartimaeus. And you know what Bar means, right? Son of. We see Simon Bar-Jonah. We see Bartholomew. And you might say that's a weird prefix, but some of you have it as a suffix. How many of you have Thompson or Johnson? It's son of Thompson. It's son of Johnson. It's a very normal name. And if we would have seen Timaeus here, we would have known that the word Timaeus means honor. One of honor. Honor toward God. And Bartimaeus is just his name. It's emphasized here again. His dad's name was Timaeus. So this honor jumps out at us. But he doesn't look very honorable, does he? First of all, he's blind. How unfortunate in this culture to be blind. There are not many options for you here. You just sit by the side of the road and you put out your cloak and you just wait for some people to come by to maybe drop a shekel. There's not much honor in that. And I think over time he probably grew weary of that. And second of all, he was poor. It's tough enough that you're blind, but to add to that poverty, he didn't have a 401k. He didn't have a huge bank account. He just trusted the people every day to show him some pity. And you can see that they were going to Jericho. Now, how many of you have been to Jericho? Look at the hands. How many of you know it's God's will that you go to Jericho, okay? I used to sit right where you're sitting, and every person up here would say, oh, you got to go to Israel. And I used to think, what's the big deal about Israel? I have my copy of the scriptures. I've seen the Ten Commandments. I know. And then we went for the first time. By God's grace, we got to go with Dr. Swindoll and Insight for Living. And now, 4 times we've been to Israel. And we've been to Jericho. And it's an oasis in the middle of a very dry area. There's date palms and fig trees. And we love when we get to stop at Jericho because they sell these big figs and these big dates. It's almost like eating a Snickers. But you know you can do it because it's just a fruit. And it's a prosperous city. And it's actually a good spot for someone like Bartimaeus. Because there's some wealth in this city. There's a lot of trading. It's an agricultural city. All around desert. But in Jericho, which bills itself as the oldest city in the world, springs and water. And in Israel, water is life. It's an oasis in the middle of a desert. And Bartimaeus would sit there every day by the side of the road, probably begging. Now, Bartimaeus had 2 strikes against him already. He was blind. That's tough enough. But he was also poor. But even though Bartimaeus was blind, he could still hear. And he had heard the stories about this Nazarene. He had heard how he could heal. And he wondered, maybe it could happen to me. Maybe someday he'd come to Jericho. And Bartimaeus was blind, but he could hear. And sometimes you know how God does that for us. I think when we have a lack in one area, it seems like he gives us a gift in another area. I'm reminded of the story of the richest man in the world, John D. Rockefeller. John D. Rockefeller had a father who was named William Rockefeller. And it was sad because he was kind of a peddler. He was kind of a con man. He'd go into a town ahead of time, and he would wear a get-up, a disguise, and he'd put a little chalkboard on his chest that hung from a buttonhole with a string. And he wrote on there, "I am deaf and dumb." And he would converse with people with just a piece of chalk. But you know what? By the end of the week there, he had flushed out all the town's secrets. You know why? Because people thought he was deaf. People thought he couldn't speak. And they would talk behind his back. They would say, well, too bad so-and-so's not here. She's the richest person in this whole town. Well, too bad he's not here, but he's had that problem. And by listening well, he learned in just a few days about every secret in the whole town. And I think that's what Bartimaeus did. He sat there every day and he heard the stories. He heard the Pharisees. He heard the scribes. He heard the teaching. But then he started hearing about this prophet way up in the Galilee. And he heard about the healings. He heard about the miracle stories. And he heard so much that he began to believe it. You can see it there in our passage. And when he heard, there's the word, and when he heard that it was Jesus the Nazarene, he began to cry out. Can you imagine? He must have said, "Today's my day. He's here. He came to Jericho. This is my chance." He said, Jesus, I'm over here. Son of David. Wow. And that's a very powerful title that means Yeshua, HaMashiach, the anointed one of God. This is the Christ. But there was a problem. And the problem was there was a big crowd of people following him. Jesus was going through Jericho on his way up to Jerusalem. We'll celebrate that this Sunday, Palm Sunday. But these people were following Jesus for the wrong reasons. These people were going up for political reasons, for power reasons. They were going up to be in the right crowd with Jesus, as getting enthroned and bringing in authority and power. And they began to rebuke our man Bartimaeus. Verse 48. And many were sternly telling him to be quiet. Did that slow down Bartimaeus? No. Bartimaeus knew this was his day. Bartimaeus was blind, but he had really good hearing. And Bartimaeus was blind, but he knew who Jesus was. And Bartimaeus was blind, but he had a loud voice. And Bartimaeus was blind, but today was his day. This was his chance. And he wasn't going to sleep in on this chance. Son of David is walking by. This is the Messiah. And he knew what the Messiah could do. He had read the Old Testament. He had heard the stories. He had heard that the Messiah was going to begin to usher in the kingdom. He was going to begin to do miracles. He was going to begin to overturn the fall and the broken order. But those people, they wanted to slow him down, didn't they? They kind of slowed his roll. They said they were sternly telling him to be quiet. That means anti-Timaeus. It's the opposite. It's the dishonoring. They were dishonoring him. They were saying, hey, we're going up to see Jesus. This is going to be amazing. And maybe I'll be the city councilor. And maybe he'll appoint me the treasurer. And then, who is that? Oh, goodness gracious, it's Bartimaeus. This is embarrassing. Bartimaeus is hollering. This is ruining our inauguration parade. Would someone shut him up? Look at Bartimaeus. What does he have to offer? He just lays there. I've given him a few shekels here and there, but look at him. That's not the kind of guy we need in our parade. That's not the kind of guy that someone like the Messiah would hang around. And you and I do that sometimes, don't we? What kind of church is it? What's their attendance? Interesting. What's their giving? Okay. What's their website like? How's their music? Possible. And finally, Jesus hears Bartimaeus. The God of the universe stopped. Jesus stopped. I've been studying this for 2 weeks and I still can't get over it. Jesus stopped. He wasn't impressed by the crowd. He wasn't impressed by the chance to go up and bring in his kingdom yet. He heard that Bartimaeus. And he said, hold on, let me hear that. What was that again? Son of David. Somebody out there really knows who I am. Someone's out there in the back row shouting out the right answer. Son of David. Bring him to me. Bring him here. And you know what the crowd did? Isn't it fickle how quick the crowd shifts? See the crowd saying, Bartimaeus, shut up. You're a nobody, Bartimaeus. And then their leader, Jesus, says, bring him here. And they say, oh yeah, I was just about to do that, Jesus. Several of us were going to get Bartimaeus. We were just headed that way to help him out. You see it there? Look at it. Mark emphasizes it. And many were sternly telling him to shut up. But he kept crying out all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. And Jesus stopped and said, call him here. And they called the blind man, saying to him, take courage, arise. Some kind of church-type words, some Christianese. Take courage, Bartimaeus, arise. He is calling for you. This is your moment. Get up, Bartimaeus, get up. How many of you have ever been to Chick-fil-A? You know what I'm talking about? God's chicken for God's people. I love me some Chick-fil-A. And I don't know what they do to those people. They brainwash them. They train them. You know what it's like? You go there. When I used to take my little kids there, Pam would be at work, 12-hour shifts at the hospital. I would take my kids to Chick-fil-A for, a good 2 or 3 hours. And let them play in the playground. And I remember when someone would come on my little kids, I would say, watch this. I'm going to talk to this wait person, and they're going to say, my pleasure. I remember one of my sons was like, Dad. And I said, hey, can I get a refill? And they're like, oh, yeah. And they get me a refill, and I said, hey, thank you. And the guy said, my pleasure. And my son went, how did you? I said, watch this, I'll do it again. I found someone else. I said, hey, can we get some more napkins over here? And she said, oh, yeah, we'll get some more napkins. I said, hey, thanks for that. And she said, my pleasure. Don't you love those Chick-fil-A people? Because they say it like they really mean it. They're there to really serve you. They're like, can I get a refill? You want more straws? You want more napkins? I'm like, yeah, bring it all on. Wash my car. Come to my house. Mow my yard. I just love their attitude because they're saying, I'm here to serve. I'm here. What do you need right now? And that's what Jesus says. He asks one of the most powerful questions I've ever seen. And Prof. Hendricks used to tell us, go through the whole Gospels and just focus on the questions of Jesus. And here's one of the biggest ones ever. What do you want me to do for you? Wow. Jesus doesn't say, Bartimaeus, if you clean yourself up. Bartimaeus, if you learn a skill. Bartimaeus, if you stay a little longer and get the doctorate, you could be a part of this group, Bartimaeus. No, he just says, what do you want me to do for you? Do you see that? Isn't that a great way to do ministry? My boss, Greg Hatterberg, does that a lot. They sit down, and I'm going on and on. All right, here's the churches we have open. Here's the resume. Here's the interview. I go into it, and finally someone will say, hey, I'm struggling in my marriage. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, let's talk about marriage instead, yeah. And sometimes I see Greg Hatterberg, and he just says, hey, how can I help you? How can I help you today? What a great way to do ministry. Hey, listen. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. We should listen twice as much as we talk. And that's hard for us preachers. But Jesus says, what can I do for you? Now, why is this such a powerful question? Because it was just asked a few verses earlier. Yeah, scroll up with me. Scroll up. You see it there? Verse 35, chapter 10. And James and John, the 2 sons of thunder, they came up to him, and they were bold, and they said to him, Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you. Wow. Would you do that to Jesus? Hey, Jesus, here's what I need. Here's what I need you to do for me. And look at the humility of Jesus. He still says, and what do you want me to do for you? It's the exact same question. You see it there? Circle it. Verse 36. The exact same question. What do you want me to do for you? It's the same question that you see in verse 51. Verse 36 and verse 51, the exact same question. Jesus said, what do you want me to do for you? And these disciples had been with Jesus for 3 years. And you know what they said? Make one of us the vice president and make one of us the executive director. We cannot wait to rule and reign in your earthly kingdom. They were asking for honor. And the son of honor, Bartimaeus, put aside his honor and said, I just want to be whole. I just want to be human. I just want people to quit stopping and showing pity on me. I want people to see me as a whole person. And these disciples, they dishonored themselves by asking that. In fact, Jesus says, you don't even know what you're asking for. Can you take the cup with me? Can you go through what I'm getting ready to go through? And then some of the ugliest words in all of Scripture. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. We can do that. God help us, Dallas Theological Seminary students, if we act like that. You remember that your need here at Dallas Seminary is not partial, it's total. You know that Jesus said to you, apart from me, you can do the THM. Apart from me, you can raise funds. Apart from me, you can go into the most difficult parts of the world and serve. No. You guys know very well that Jesus said, apart from me, you can do what? Nothing. Say it again. Nothing. And so we close this story by looking at what happened. I told you the first question was, what's your motivation for doing ministry? What motivates you to do ministry? For the disciples, after 3 years, it was still, we want to be in a place of honor. But for Bartimaeus, it was just, I want to be whole. I want to be a human. I want to follow you. And casting aside his cloak, there it is, casting aside his cloak, he jumped up and he came to Jesus. You know that cloak had become his identity. He took it with him everywhere. It was his little fundraiser that he laid out in front of people. Maybe you heard a shekel drop on it. He slept with it at night. He was poor. He was a beggar. He was blind. All he had was that cloak. And it became a part of who he was. He began to see himself that way. I'm just a no-good, useless beggar. And I'm blind, and I'll never amount to anything. And when Jesus said, come to me, come over here. What do you want from me? He said, today is my day. And he threw off that cloak. Can't you imagine the joy that must have been in his heart? He's asking for me. He's calling for me. He wants me to talk to him. He's asking me a question. And he says he threw off that cloak and he jumped up and he's still blind. Maybe he threw away the cloak because he didn't want to trip himself up. But I think that cloak had become who he saw himself to be, his identity. And casting it aside, he jumped up and he came and he answered Jesus. Jesus said, what do you want me to do for you? And the blind man said, my teacher. It's a very personal, intimate term. He's saying, my instructor, my teacher, my leader, I want to regain my sight. I want to see. He just said, I want the light to come in. And Jesus said to him, go your way. Your faith has made you well. And immediately he regained his sight and he began following him on the road. And so I ask you that question. What do you want Jesus to do for you? How do you answer that? Don't answer out loud. What do you want Jesus to do for you? You see, in verse 46, it says that Bartimaeus was sitting by the road. Do you see that there? It's a very technical term in Mark. It means he's not on the road. He's not in the way. The first Christians were simply called the way because they followed Jesus. Jesus said, follow me. And so the way was the Christian body. It was that small band of strugglers. And that very technical term says Bartimaeus was by the road, sitting alongside the road. And at the end, he's on the way. Do you see it there in verse 52? He's following him on the road. So I ask you, from verse 46, sitting beside the road, to verse 52, being in the road, what got him there? How did he get from being by the road to being on the road? And you say, well, it was probably the crowd of people. They were a big help, weren't they? Was it that big crowd of people? Was it that crowd that was going up to inaugurate our new president, King Jesus? No, they weren't much help, were they? They sternly rebuked him. And you say, well, maybe it was his giftedness. No, he was a beggar. He was blind. He just asked for shekels. He brought nothing to the table much. And you say it had to be Jesus. Yes, that's true. But be a good student here. Put on your thinking cap because you'll see it right there. It says, Jesus answers with the correct answer, your faith has made you well. And that word sozo means your salvation. It's made you whole. It's made you well. Sometimes we talk about, as we did on Tuesday, salvation. And we say, is salvation just ethical? We say, is salvation just judicial? And here we see that Bartimaeus is asking for just the basic needs of life. I just want to see again. But he knew who Jesus was. He knew that Jesus was Son of David, Messiah. And you and I, we need to do ministry that way, don't we? Let's not be like the crowd that sometimes pushes people away and say, you don't know Jesus like we know Jesus, or you're not cleaned up enough to come to church yet, or you're not ready for our church yet. And let's not be like the disciples who gave the wrong answer. When Jesus said, what do you want me to do for you? And you and I say, we want positions of honor. We want positions of prestige. Whatever that means for you in your life. Let us be, like Mark is pointing out here, Bartimaeus, who sees Jesus for who he really is. And let's point people to the real Jesus. As Patrick comes to close us with our final song, you and I are going to be doing ministry all this week, leading up to Palm Sunday, leading up to Good Friday, leading up to Resurrection Sunday. And this is the high holy week on the church calendar. Christmas, the Incarnation, Easter, the Resurrection. And let us be careful about, what clothes am I going to wear? Where are we going to have brunch? Are we going to be able to take the family picture? And let us see this walk that Bartimaeus took, where he said, Jesus, I just want to be made whole. I just want to see you accurately. And you and I can do ministry that way when we do it with the right motives.